Hi, I'm Rashid Darden, the Associate Secretary for Communications and Outreach at Friends General Conference. Today we are joined for Black Fire Live, a conversation between Dr. Harold D. Weaver, Jr. and Dr. Emma Lapsansky-Werner and me. Today we'll be discussing the book Black Fire, African American Quakers on Spirituality and Human Rights. This past spring, the audiobook version of Black Fire was released, and we'll be talking about that, the creation of the original book, and much more. Quaker Press of Friends General Conference proudly announces the release of the audiobook edition of Black Fire, African American Quakers on Spirituality and Human Rights. This groundbreaking anthology, originally edited by Dr. Harold D. Weaver, Jr., Paul Kreisa, and Stephen W. Angel, brings to life the voices of African Americans within and adjacent to the Quaker community, offering profound insights into their spiritual journeys and unwavering commitment to justice. The audiobook was produced by The Quaker Project and was made possible by generous grants from the Marshall Reynolds Foundation and New York Yearly Meetings Lindley Murray Fund. Originally published in 2011, Black Fire has been lauded for illuminating the rich contributions of African American friends over 3 centuries. Now, with the audiobook format, listeners can experience these powerful narratives through the cadence of sermons, speeches, poetry, and essays that resonate with authenticity and passion. The audiobook features compelling performances by narrators Lance Danton and Janai Fleming, who you will hear from a little later, who convey the depth and nuance of each contributor's message. Spanning 12 hours and 37 minutes, this unabridged edition invites audiences to engage with the spiritual and activist legacies of figures such as Sojourner Truth, Howard Thurman, Ira DeAugustine Reed, and many others. The Black Fire audiobook is available for purchase and streaming through various platforms including Spotify, Barnes & Noble, Libro.fm, Apple Books, and audiobooks.com. Listeners can also explore a behind-the-scenes episode of The Quaker Podcast featuring excerpts and discussions with the editors, providing additional context and insight into the creation of this significant work. For more information or to purchase the audiobook, please visit QuakerBooks.org. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Harold D. Weaver, Jr., known to many of us as Hal, the visionary founder and director of the Black Quaker Project. Dr. Weaver is an associate at Harvard University's Hutchins Center for African and African American Research and at the Davis Center for Russian and Eurasian Studies, where he contributes deep insight into transnational cultural relations. A pioneering scholar activist, he founded the Africana Studies Department at Rutgers and has championed Paul Robeson's legacy through publications, film screenings, and international dialogues. Through the Black Quaker Project, he has curated vital works such as Black Fire and the Pendle Hill pamphlet Race, Systemic Violence, and Retrospective Justice, advocating for retrospective justice within Quakerism. Dr. Weaver has served in key governance roles across numerous Quaker institutions, including CUNO, AFSC, Pendle Hill, and FWCC, bringing Quaker testimonies of truth, peace, equality, community, and justice into sharp focus. Please join me in welcoming him to Black Fire Live. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Emma Lapsansky-Werner, Emeritus Professor of History and Curator of the Quaker Collection at Haverford College. A dedicated scholar and civil rights veteran, Dr. Lapsansky-Werner has spent her career exploring the intersections of Quakerism, African American history, and American social history. She has authored and edited numerous works including Struggle for Freedom and Back to Africa, and has helped preserve the voices of Quakers of color through her work with the Quakers of Color International Archive. Dr. Lapsansky-Werner continues to teach, consult, and inspire as a writer, public historian, and devoted friend. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Lapsansky-Werner to Blackfire Live. When you make a financial contribution to Friends General Conference, you are supporting a 501c3 nonprofit organization that is also a Quaker service organization supporting yearly meetings, monthly meetings, and individual friends. FGC offers books, community, and experiences through events such as this one, but also the Gathering of Friends occurring in the summer, online consultations, spiritual deepening activities, the spiritual deepening library on our website, and much, much more. When you make a donation to FGC, it can support Quaker Press, which is our publication arm, QuakerBooks, which is our distribution arm, and author events such as the one you're sitting in right now. If you'd like to make a donation, please visit fgcquaker.org/donate and learn about the many ways that you can support this meaningful work. And we're going to get right to it. So welcome. Good evening. Good to see you both.
Good to be here.
Good to be seeable.
How did you conceive the idea for Blackfire?
Rashid, before I answer that question, I would like to thank my co-editors, Paul Creasy and Stephen Angel. I would like to thank Emma for being brave enough to do the foreword, and for Ann Steer-Nash for all the work she's done with us and for us, and for selecting some of the poetry that appears. I would also like to thank Friends General Conference, and you will see in my answer to this question how important Friends General Conference was from the conception to the publication and publicity. The idea came in January 2003 when FGC invited each yearly meeting in the United States to send an African American and a European American delegate to Pittsburgh to try to figure out what the Society of Friends was doing in race relations. We had a great time together, a lot of affective work going on, but it was very contrary to the kind of workshops that I delivered on race, which focused on the cognitive and therefore knowledge and skills. So I was joyful in meeting folks, but very frustrated that we came away with, I won't say nothing, but we came away with very little follow-up. And I can't, besides the book Blackfire, I'm not quite sure what else came out of that particular meeting. While at that meeting, which I introduced to folks to the new film on Bayard Rustin, which we had shown at Wellesley meeting, before it hit the national television screen, I was exposed to a book about one of the founders of the Harlem Renaissance, and I did not realize that he was a Quaker, and so that sort of planted something in my mind. But more importantly, I came away feeling that I had an obligation to conceive and carry out a project that would involve collaboration between European American Quakers and African American Quakers. Well, a few weeks later, I went off to Taiwan as a visiting professor at one of the universities. This was about the time that SARS was arriving. And far off, I had a chance to envision what might I do? What might I do in the U.S. to improve cross-cultural understanding? Well, I conceived an African film festival and a Chinese film festival for the museum north of Boston, Chinese, which was had brought over a Chinese house. And I said, well, for friends, we really need a book. We really need a book that I can invite Paul Creasy, a European American scholar whom I'd met at Pittsburgh at the Pittsburgh meeting, and that's really how the book of the birth of the book. And later, and a few years later, down at an FWCC meeting in Guatemala, I met Steve Angel, and I had known that he had done some writing about the Black Church, and I invited him to join us, and it was he who conceived the subtitle of Spirituality and Human Rights, for which I'm grateful. So that's basically how the idea of the book came about. It took us a long time to finish the book. We started by being exposed to a book that Kenneth Ives had written called Black Quakers, Short Biographies. And that was our starting point. And then from there, I explored the libraries of Haverford and Swarthmore and Pendle Hill. And Paul and Steve brought in other possibilities. So that's how this idea got started and materialized.
So, Emma, how did you get involved with Blackfire?
I got a call, or a communique, maybe it was an email in those days, from Hal and Steve Angel. I had known each of them in other ways, other projects, asking me, really in my role as curator of Quaker collection at Haverford College, to take a long lens look at the project itself and at the series of essays, and to do something that would tie them together and help each of them to illuminate each other. It was an easy job. These were fascinating essays. They were fascinating essays written by people who deeply cared about what they were writing about. I say to my students in my writing courses, let your reader know immediately why you care and why you think they might too. And each of these essays does that. Each of these essays talks about why the writer cares and why indeed we might care also.
So, Hal, I think that's a good segue. How were the voices chosen for this anthology?
Well, the voices were chosen, as I indicated, actually. Where do we start? Remember that the book that Vanessa and Donna came up with, Fit for Freedom,
Mm-hmm.
was supposed to have was commissioned first by FGC in order to expand on a book called Black Quakers, short biographies by Kenneth Ives. And of course, it turned into much more than that. So the first batch of biographies that I pulled together was simply from Ives, and then we went together. We went to Paul and to Steve to pull in others. I remember, um, for example, that Steve came up with Howard Thurman, and that was a real discovery, because Howard Thurman was, in fact, a Quaker. He was a Quaker through the Greater Quaker Fellowship and not through the normal monthly meeting thing. So that was one of the real discoveries, I think, of this particular book, coming forth with Howard Thurman as a Quaker, not just a marginal person, but he was a cosmopolitan theologian, but he was committed to Quakerism and even studied, took a year off from his life to study under Rufus Jones at Haverford, which was a very, very important for him. So that's basically how we came up with the names, because there were very few, and any black Quaker who did any writing whatsoever on any subject we were looking for. We could not narrow it because there were so few. And I'm always amazed and amused, actually, when a person like a black Quaker from Cuba comes to Wellesley meeting and says, well, if the Quakers were so much involved in slavery, why are there so, and ending slavery, why are there so few Quakers today? Why are so few Quakers today? And that is answered in the book by the scholar from Rutgers who did a survey and came forth with some answers.
Thank you, Hal. So, in the preface of Blackfire, it's mentioned that there's a need for white Quakers to listen more deeply. That's something that resonates with me. Emma, how might you encourage meetings today to practice that deep listening?
Well, that's an interesting question. Um, I do have a sense that that individual meetings, and we're all across the country and lots of different kinds of communities around them, are looking to do this, but haven't quite figured out how to do it without being intrusive, how without sort of stepping on people's toes. Um, and it's a struggle that is not only about race, it's about gender, it's about a variety of other kinds of uh, uh, sensitive issues. And I see someone in the group who's nodding that yes, it's not just race that Quakers are struggling with. It's gender, and particularly complicated and cross gender. That we Quakers, I would say both African American and African American and European American, continue to think of ourselves as an evolving religion. And in the process of thinking ourselves as evolving, we end up often with more questions than answers. Um, from my point of view, that's okay. But for many people, the desire is there for some answers and some instructions on how to fix things. Um, I keep thinking of Quakers and our early struggles with what to do with Native Americans. How do we make them like us? How do we help them be religious in the way that we understand religion? And these are complicated questions. Um, I have to say that I my own self am not particularly worried about it. That over time, it has become clear that meeting by meeting and person by person, Quakerism and questions of race and otherness of many kinds, have continued to be on the table and continued to bring people to probe them. And when the answers come slowly, as Quaker thought has always said it would, and they come one by one. Um, and one way to look at it is to look at Quaker schools, which have slowly, ever so slowly, said, we don't have enough things and people in our schools to reflect the real world. How do we go about doing that? Mistakes get made, some get fixed. And at this point in time, there is not a Quaker school that I can think of that doesn't have a process and an attentiveness to race and gender. It didn't come easily, it didn't come slowly. And the job may not be done yet, but opening ourselves to doing the job is maybe part of an answer. Don't know whether that gets at your question or not, but I'm a big person who likes process.
And I would, if I may contribute to this also,
Please.
it does seem as though friends that I have encountered want the answers, want the roadmap, want a shortcut to how to not be offensive, how to many, and maybe this is just society as it is today, they want the shortcut and do not relish the journey, the uncomfortable journey of what it means to transform into the type of society that we seem to want to be, but stumble frequently, whether it is racism or sexism or transphobia or what have you. And I think we're in a merit badge society. Once we have checked off the box, we want to label ourselves,
It's finished.
anti-racist, not racist, and finished and graduated, Eagle Scout levels. But I'll bring us back to the topic at hand, and I'd like to know from each of you.
Before we go to that,
Sure,
may I make a comment?
sure.
Emma mentioned the Quaker schools. I happen to have gone to a Quaker school, Westtown, and a Quaker college, Haverford. So I had 6 years of fantastic Quaker education, which I have a chance with. If I have a chance to comment on, I would be happy to share its impact. But I think we have to recognize that Quaker coeducational schools were very late in desegregating racially. In the 1950s, after Ralph Bunche received the Nobel Peace Prize, George School invited him to speak there. And he declined. He said, "I will not go to any school that will not allow my daughters in." Well, friends, I never saw Quakers desegregate so quickly or make a decision so quickly. The Quaker process, which you and I admire, but it has held back us in many ways, was all of a sudden they decided to admit Quakers, black people. And I think, but we have to look at why were Quakers reluctant in admitting black people, especially black males. There was a real fear of interracial relationships. And Quakers often gave the excuse over time, oh, what would their children be like? Wouldn't they suffer? That was often an excuse for not desegregating. It was, in the case of Westtown, it was not the board or the faculty that forced the school to desegregate, but the student body, the young students who were not afraid of these things that these old fogey Quakers were afraid of. And I think we have to admit that whereas we have, and we'll obviously talk about that in terms of slavery, whereas Quakers have had a good rep historically in race, the reality is, Emma and others have commented, is much, much, much more complex and much more complicated.
So, since we're on that thread, I'm going to go a little bit out of order from the agreed upon questions that we had. And I do want to skip to our question about slavery and how you have urged Quakers, as many of us have, to reckon with our involvement in slavery. What are some practical steps you think that Quaker meetings and Quaker organizations should take next? What sort of what sort of resources have you added to the canon, if you will, about this reckoning?
Well, I'd like to recommend that friends who haven't read our Pendle Hill pamphlet, Race, Systemic Violence, and Retrospective Justice, might want to take a look at it. The reality, of course, is that Quakers, as Uncle Tom's, as what's the famous novel that where Quakers really get the very good reputation for slavery, being anti-slavery.
It's Uncle Tom's Cabin.
Pardon me?
It's Uncle Tom's Cabin, and what is
Uncle Tom's Cabin. Uncle Tom's
featured
Cabin.
in there is the runaways who are nourished and nurtured in Quaker gatherings and places in the Midwest.
Mhm, mhm. But obviously, the reality is that Quakers could be expelled from meetings if they advocated freedom of the enslaved Africans, and all sorts of other things. And of course, Benjamin Franklin and William Penn and all the great leaders of that era owned slaves. We have come up with the concept of retrospective justice, and we draw upon the Brown University study, the team that was appointed by an African American female president. I think she was the first African American female Ivy League president, Ruth Simmons. And this concept of retrospective justice, calls for 3 steps. And I need to refresh my memory to recall these steps now, because they sometimes slip my 92-year-old mind. The first thing that we advocate is that we admit that there is
Collusion, past and present collusion.
exploitation, ownership of slaves, ownership of human beings, exploitation of human beings. But we do not advocate apologizing, because when people apologize, that's often as far as they get. The next step is deep research on the subject, deep research for the details. And then the third step is actual dealing with it in the present. reparations, and other forms of action that help to deal with the psychological, historical, sociological, educational, all the negative things that have happened to enslaved people. There must be some sort of retrospective justice. For me, it's justice, and that's one of the reasons we advocate so strongly for justice within the Society of Friends, because thanks to the Friends Council on Education, their spices, justice is not in spices. So we advocate jam with spices, justice and mercy with the other things that that spices stand for. So those are specific steps, Rashid, that the Black Quaker Project advocates. And as we will see, hopefully, in our next Pendle Hill pamphlet, a call for action, a 10-point call for action, which includes these steps that we have been advocating since 2008.
So, how could you tell us more about the Black Quaker Project? This is your ministry, correct?
This is our ministry. It's a ministry supported by Wellesley Friends Meeting and the New England Yearly Meeting of Friends. The idea of the Black Quaker Project is to highlight the achievements, to highlight the concerns of people of African descent and other people of color worldwide. How do we do this? Well, one way, of course, is through the publications, the Black Fire publication that we are dealing with now. That's a part of the ministry, and the Pendle Hill pamphlet and other publications. We deal with it through advocacy. You mentioned our work on Paul Robeson. As friends now know, Robeson comes from 2 centuries of Quaker ancestors, direct Quaker ancestors. His mother, who was burned in a fire when he was 5 or 6, was a practicing Quaker. And his ancestors go back through important people in American history, especially Philadelphia history, that Emma might want to mention in this discussion. Advocacy also includes our work on behalf of Bayard Rustin. Rustin, one of the things that we did when we were a board member at AFSC is to restore Rustin's name to the very important Quaker pamphlet. What's the name of the pamphlet, Emma?
Speak truth to power.
Speak truth to power. Speak truth to power. In fact, sometimes Rustin is erroneously labeled as the person who invented that term, and we obviously know that's not true. So publications, advocacy. One of our major activities now, and Emma has been a very important part of that, is our Quakers of Color International Archives. People didn't know, I guess, that we have our own CIA, Quakers of Color International Archive, in which we interview via video, on video, and then transcribe, and then post publicly. Earlier it was at UMass Amherst, but as of next few weeks, we will make a big announcement that Haverford College is receiving and posting in early August our next batch of video taped interviews of Quakers of color from around the world. Those are 3 of our major activities, and there are others perhaps that could be could be, we have had the film festival that reaches many people around the world. And those are those that I would like to mention at this moment.
I have
Of
to
course,
say a little
we're
bit.
all called upon to give advice to Quaker monthly meetings, yearly meetings, and we are very proud of course, the collaboration we do with the various Quaker organizations. I'm sorry, Emma, you want to say something?
I was just going to say that I think that one of the things the archive collection, which you have spearheaded and supported and encouraged over several years, is that the only way to fix things is to figure out what's broken. And this collection of interviews helps to define and to describe the experience that many different kinds of African Americans have had in the Religious Society of Friends. And the fundamental questions that go with it are, why did you come to Friends and why do you stay? And what does the Religious Society of Friends have to offer? And what do you, as a self-conceived person of color, have to offer to the Society of Friends? It's a friendship building network that allows people to hear each other in a way that will allow, over time, the same thing that people did the first time European Quakers sat down and said, maybe slavery is not such a good idea. They did so in 1680s. It took them almost 100 years to say, okay, what do we do about it? And how do we do it? How do we do what we do about it? And to whom do we listen about it, what we do and how we do it? And what keeps many of us here is the recognition that this is one of the few religious vessels that sees itself as continuing to grow, continuing to listen to itself and to the world outside, and to respond to that. And what Hal and his team have been offering is some information with which to think. So the Quaker of Color interview initiative has deposited at this point several dozen conversations with African Americans who have said, this is why I came, this is why I stay, this is what works, this is what we need to fix. And that's the way forward. And I can see a woman named Sandy Cuman nodding as she's thinking about what we're saying here. So thank you for your nod of hearing us. And on my screen, Audrey Greenhalgh is doing the same thing, nodding and thinking. And that's exactly what the Quakers of Color Initiative is asking as we, as a human community, move forward.
And
Thank you for
that. Thank you, Emma, for those details. Something that we've been adding in the last year or so is having in our interviews is having people critique what needs to be done, what they are dissatisfied with in the Society of Friends, and suggestions that they are making for the future. And we will release some of those in print form, excerpts from some of those in our hopefully next Pendle Hill pamphlet. But the new batch of interviews all include questions of asking for how can we improve the Religious Society of Friends, which I'm very happy to have to say, and also to indicate that one of the assets of that QCIAR interviews are that we have leaders from various Quaker organizations who are giving their viewpoints and what they are actually trying to do within their organizations.
And they are people from all over the world. It's not just an American collection.
It's one of the interesting things to see is how inclusive the Black Quaker Project is for all of the various Quaker branches, if you will. And I was one of the people that was interviewed this past spring for the archive. And, I just got to say, as a point of personal privilege, you asked the right person when you asked for critique. And we might have added about 20, 30 more minutes to the interview just with that question. Um, but let us get back to the Blackfire and its audiobook that was released a few so that everybody here knows this project came to fruition because of the generosity of several donors who made this happen, which were mentioned earlier. And it's tough creating an audiobook if that is not your jam to begin with. Most of the publications from Quaker Press are not audiobooks. If you are an independently published novelist or author, as I am, you know that sometimes the things that we wish we could do for accessibility, we can't do because they're very expensive for independent publishing houses and independently published authors. But now we got the funds together. We were able to make a Blackfire audiobook that we're really proud of. That was a lot of fun to see happening. I know Audrey and I got some of the early listens for some of the snippets, and it was a fun thing to experience. I'll focus on the fun. There were times where it wasn't as fun because it was new and we had, a learning curve, if you will. But I'm wondering from both of you, starting with Emma, now that it's in audiobook form, how do you hope the spoken word will add a dimension for friends that are able to hear these words for the first time in addition to reading them?
That's an interesting question. I think one of the things that excites me about audiobooks, and I have to say that I'm an interesting character because I'm both in favor of them and a champion of them, and I don't use them, is that what it does is expand the possibility for people to be able to engage with the materials. My daughter uses audiobooks when she commutes to work, and it's a person who doesn't have time to read but does have time for an audiobook in the car. Um, Audiobooks make it possible for people with difficulty seeing to engage with the materials here. Audiobooks remind people um, of the humanness of the discussion being had because there's a voice in it, not just something flat on a page. And I must say, delighted to have the possible consumption, if you let me use that word, possible consumption expanded to people who, for whatever reasons, don't have the access to a physical piece of paper. Um, it seems to me that much that is on audiobooks isn't terribly engaging, isn't terribly something that you want to actually connect with and think about. Um, and this offers that possibility to people. This is chewy material, interesting material, engaging material, and now it's available to people who, for whatever reasons, can't sit still and read a book.
Hal, have you got anything to add?
Sure.
What was your experience when you first heard it?
Well, let me tell you this. I'm one of those people that Emma mentioned who has visual problems reading now until I get my eyes corrected this summer. I didn't have an eye operation, the simple one, because a friend of mine had lost an eye in that simple operation. But so I have been doing lots of audio reading, and I'm especially attracted when the author herself reads what she has written. Of course, this is not the case with Blackfire. I got a copy first time. I received a copy just a couple of days ago, and I decided to start with the actor's rendering of my preface number one, the first preface there. It blew my mind because his voice penetrated much deeper than my writing would penetrate the heart. So I was just mind blown by what I heard that I had written, and it was more powerfully delivered than I had written it. So I certainly recommend that people take a look at, and some of these speeches, like Sojourner Truth and others, were delivered orally. So to have them now, people have a chance to listen to those deliveries, those sermons, those speeches, as they were intended, even though not by the original person, the original deliverer. It is mind-boggling. It is so emotional. As I said, I was so touched by what I heard.
It was
Yeah,
truly
I have,
something to hear.
and I have to say that though I don't do it regularly, I have had some really powerful experiences with the audiobook experience. Um, and I share Hal's view of this particular one because the materials are engaging and the voices that deliver those materials in this particular version of an audiobook are really quite powerful. Well chosen voices. Get the right match. It can be powerful. And this one gets the right match.
I just
And
want to
I
highlight
congratulate
something.
you, Rashid. I congratulate you and Audrey and others for what you did on that. This is a fantastic
Yeah.
product.
Well, we could not have done it without you. And I want to share something that Jana has put in the chat, as well as Karen. Jana says, "Thank you so much for creating the audiobook. I am a person who learns much more via audio than visual, so the audiobook of Blackfire has made the book accessible to me. And I must say, the audio of this book is so well done. It really comes alive." And can thank John Watts for that, obviously, from the Quaker Project, and
And
who we
the
know.
sister who did it.
What's that?
And the sister who was involved.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Whose name escapes me, but we
Too. Mm-hmm.
Audrey,
Georgia Sparling.
Yeah.
Georgia Sparling.
Yeah. We've got to
Thank you
congratulate.
so much. And Karen Warren says this book will be good for us to share in our meetings, reading aloud and discussing. So we hope you do. We hope that you all do visit Quaker Books and get your print copies and also promote the audio copies. As we're coming toward the end of the hour, we don't want to keep you all night, so I am going to skip a couple of questions, but I believe we are leaving the important ones for the end. Um, I know that last year, Hal and several of you participated in the FWCC World Plenary, and I know that you had some thoughts about that, but I'm going to frame that as such. What gives you hope for the future of Quakerism?
That is a very, very important question. And if you had asked me that before last August, I could not have answered that as I answer it today. Last August in Johannesburg, South Africa, the Friends World Committee for Consultation pulled together hundreds of Quakers from around the world, both in person and via the internet, via Zoom. And they came up with two documents. I want to share one of them. One document was the epistle. Frankly, I was very disappointed with the epistle. But they came up with a second document that I think is one of the most important documents that I've seen in recent Quaker history. And in that document is this paragraph that makes me hopeful that Quakers, at least some Quakers, have seen the light. I will share that with you. We grieve with God for the exponential impact of historical and ongoing injustice. This includes the impact of colonization, forced displacement, slavery, economic exploitation, and racism. We are called to disrupt patterns of oppression and division, to acknowledge offenses, to challenge false notions of white supremacy, to repudiate doctrines of discovery, to make amends, and to work for reparative and retrospective justice. We are called in our Quaker communities to be patterns and examples, to share gifts and skills, to be brave, to become radically inclusive, and to celebrate diversity. Are we ready to take up these callings? That makes me hopeful for the Religious Society of Friends in 2025.
Thank you, Hal. We have placed that paragraph as well as a link where it can be found on the FWCC website. It is a PDF document in Kiswahili, Spanish, and English. So we've put that in the chat for everyone, and we can make sure that also goes up on the website where we host this video.
Thank you.
I think it's also, if you let me step in there for a minute, I think it's also worth noting that the Friends World Committee for Consultation began its work in the 1930s. Long ago, it said, we are now many different kinds of Quakers in many different countries and embedded in many different cultures. And we're having a hard time talking to each other. But we're going to figure out how to talk to each other. And they have continued to do that. They've made that their focus. We're talking generation after generation after generation. And it's part of what makes me hopeful. That is to say that the people who thought of this, that the various flavors of Quakerism are all part of one unit, began that in the 30s, before any of these people who are around now were born. But the energy is still there. And it makes me think of the Martin Luther King line, one of my favorites of historical justice, and that is, the arc of history is long, but it bends toward justice. And this particular organization, FWCC, is in many ways the most interesting thing Quakers have created, from my point of view. Its purpose has continued to be, let's find a way to get all of these Quakers who are squabbling with each other to figure out that they don't need to do that. The continuous process. And it reminds me of the favorite phrase, peace is a road, not a destination. Justice is a road, not a destination. And each of us needs to be called to put our feet in the road.
Amen.
Beautiful. So, Emma, I think we're going to have you give the final sort of, dare I say, charge to the group here. So we're all assembled, and we want to end with a takeaway for the room. But there's also something we call an exit ticket. So if you're an educator, a contemporary educator, we hope, you're adults and there's free will, but we hope that you will hear what Emma has to share next, what Hal will respond to, and you'll have a chance to respond in the chat as well with your own reflections. And we'd like to capture that and maybe do something with that so you all can see what this reflection is going to be. But I give too much of a preface sometimes, so I'm going to shut up. I'm going to thank you all for coming, and I'm going to let Emma kind of pull us all together.
Well, I'm hoping I can pull us all together. FWCC has been trying to do it since 1937, but I'm going to do what I can tonight. And I want to I want to issue an invitation. I want us to come to the table. Given the insightful view that Hal and the team was able to provide into the worlds of African American Quakers in 2011, the Black Fire is not only a retrospective look at African Americans, but it is something embedded in 2011. It is a voice of where we were in 2011. How do we honor and update the work of understanding Quakerism in international perspective? In 2011, the world was in the early stages of seeing Quakers of the Southern Hemisphere, and Quakers of color, and Quakers of non-European language begin to emerge as the majority in the numbers of Quakers. That's where we were in 2011. That majority has been growing. And now, a decade and a half later, as increasing numbers of the leadership and spokespeople are in the minds and voices of non-Europeans, how might Black Fire help to inform Quakers' understandings of Friends' place in an emerging world? We're not where we were in 2011. We are where we are in 2025. Where do we want to be in 2035? When we have an emerging world of AI, we have widespread and instant communication and the attendant fake news, as you use the words that go with it, and global political power shifts and sources of pain and embarrassment in nearly every country in the world. You're busy looking at this one that's misbehaving, and then you look and there's another one that's doing it. How do we do a Quaker look in leadership? I'm grateful for the launching pad set by Black Fire, and I'm excited to see how present and future interpretations will build on its global and community implications. I'd love to hear from people who are here tonight and the friends you talk to who aren't here tonight but could be and should be, and to think about, where do we go from here? The road, the arc of history is long, but we have the power to bend it toward justice. I'd love to hear from the 200 of you who are out there thinking and chewing on this. I see Gwen Weaver's face looking very thoughtful. I see Jenna Noyes thinking, She has that look on her face. So does Martha Schwope, who's smiling because she's got an idea. But let's stick together and join hands and move ourselves forward. We've got a propeller in this audiobook. We can take that propeller with us.
Thank you, Emma. Hal, do you have any
I
final thoughts?
my thoughts were to share this that I've already shared before that. about the FWCC. Of course, I'm grateful that the leadership of the American Friends Service Committee, the leadership of Pendle Hill, some of the leadership of the FCNL, some of the leadership of FWCC World, some of the leadership of FWCC Africa. Those are specific examples of Quakers of color who have taken on leadership and provided a new route, a new way of looking at things. The Society of Friends of 2025 is not what it was in 2020. I mean, it's significantly changed since then. I'm just happy about that. And I'm looking forward to hearing what friends are writing that we can share with him and me as we learn, as we synthesize, and we are certainly looking forward in our interviews and in publishing through Pendle Hill pamphlets and other ways some of the things that people are sharing with us. We hope it'll be continue to improve and become more just, because God knows we need examples of justice in the kind of society that we are currently being exposed to in the White House in Washington and elsewhere. Thank you very much for pulling this together today, Rashid.
Indeed.
Thanks for having us have this conversation. All of you who came and brought your interest and your energy and your promise and your commitment.
Yeah, definitely.
Something else with you Thursday night, but you didn't.
Well, I mean, we don't have the Cosby Show anymore, so, I guess we got to settle for each other. I do want to say, I think I would be personally remiss if I didn't send a shout out to the former General Secretary of Fringe General Conference, Dwight L. Wilson, upon whose shoulders I personally stand as a Black Quaker, as a Quaker working at FGC, as a Quaker trying to be a leader among Quakers. And I stand upon his shoulders as much as I stand on both of your shoulders as Black Quaker elders who are also writers, who are also teachers. You did the work to get the PhDs. I am not so motivated, but I still thank you both for your gifts that you have brought to this community, for your ministry, and for all that you have done. And not just your labor, but who you are as people. We thank you. FGC thanks you. The over 70 people who have participated tonight also thank you. Friends, thank you all for coming out tonight. We really appreciate it. Don't forget, the chat is going to remain open. We are happy to hear your thoughts on anything you've heard tonight. If you have ideas, anything about the future, anything you like this evening, feel free to drop it in the chat. But until next time, and hopefully next time will be next week, where I, yours truly, will be in conversation with Betsy Bramman of Friends Meeting of Washington to discuss my novel, A Peculiar Legacy, which is the story of a Black worshiping community in Washington, D.C., influenced by the Black Quaker, the real life Quaker, Jenny Mustafa. So thank you all so much for coming tonight. Let's all wave bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, all of you.
All of you. All of
You
you.
brought.
Peace and blessings.